Thank you very much for being with us here on LFR on LNK. I'm your host, Dale Johnson. Every month, we take a deep dive into Lincoln Fire and Rescue, bringing up experts, expertise, policies, safety tips. That's where we will focus today, safety tips for the winter weather season. And as always, we have an expert. We have Jason Relford. Jason is fire inspector, investigator, does a lot of things for the Lincoln Fire Bureau, the Lincoln Bureau of Fire Prevention, hazardous device technician, all of the above on his business card. Jason, good to have you in. Thank you.
A pleasure.
Winter can be a dangerous season.
Absolutely.
It's got holidays mingled into it, which people, rightfully so, focus on.
Yes.
But there are hidden dangers too, and we'll touch on some of them. Let's talk about keeping warm.
Yes.
Winter weather brings cold and means that people use to stay warm. Space heaters.
Space heaters are a huge concern. One of the biggest concerns that I have with them is that people want them to be close to them, so they will use extension cords, which they're not meant to power those devices. So if you're using a space heater, you'll want to plug that directly into the wall. And now is a great time to take a look at the space heaters that you have in your home. And if it's one that you've had for 15 years, might be a great time to replace it. Make sure that it has some of the modern safety features that we look for, like anti-tip protection, overheat protection, things of that nature, to make sure that when you're using it, it will not cause a fire or an incident in your home.
Jason, I've lived a few more winters than you, and I can remember some of those old space heaters. They just scream dangerous compared to the safety features that have been built in to the new ones these days.
Between timers and, like I said, the anti-tip features, the ones that we have today, I will not say that they are fireproof, but they have a lot of features in them that make them fire resistant, and a little bit of that prevention goes a long way.
One of the biggest is the tip over.
For sure.
Mechanism. That didn't used to exist.
No.
They would tip over whether it was a dog, whether it was the kids.
Whether it was,
and it would stay hot.
And I mean, with carpets, with rugs, with blankets, with couches, with pretty much anything, if it gets hot enough, it will catch fire. So when you have those extra safety features that are built in to essentially turn this machine off if it's getting to that point, that is definitely helpful. So we want to make sure that our devices have those.
Explain why an extension cord is not a good idea for a space heater.
So a lot of times the extension cords that we have in our homes, first and foremost, they're made of cheap plastics, cheap wiring, and they are not meant to be energized for the length of time that we normally use them. Most people will buy the cheapest one they can find, unfortunately, and they'll plug it in and they will leave it, and it's energized 24/7, and they are generally meant to be used for a temporary amount of time. And when I say temporary, I mean, here's this thing I need to use very quickly, but here's my job, here's my plug-in. I plug it in, I do my job, I unplug it, I move on with life. But convenience often takes over common sense, so we plug it in and we leave it until that time when it becomes a problem. And there's a concept that we have, the normalization of this deviance, where this thing is not a problem for such a long amount of time that we forget about it until it becomes a problem, and then there we find ourselves. So those extension cords, like I said, they're not meant to be used for an extended period of time, and we forget about them until we don't forget about them.
And don't leave the house.
Absolutely.
Don't leave the house with it turned on.
Don't leave the house with it turned on. Much like we spent a very long time campaigning to get people not to leave their houses with candles on. And now we're switching that to don't leave your house with your extension cords plugged in. And hopefully we can make some headway with that.
Well, there are flameless candles.
Yes, flameless
candles. You take us to our next
great.
subject, flameless instead of real candles.
Yeah, it's a great look. You get the same ambience that you would get with a regular candle with none of the danger.
admittedly, it's tough to tell.
Yes.
If from a distance, they make them so convincing these days that unless they probably even have scents to them, the smell.
I would imagine.
I would think. If not, I'll patent that. I'll just.
There you go.
That's my idea. If it isn't already out there.
You know, and in my neighborhood, there's actually one of my neighbors has a light on the front doorstep. That's one of those flameless candles that's at night. And there's sometimes where I'm out with the dogs and I'll see that and it just catches me just right. And I go, oh no, wait, no, that's the light. But they are convincing to the point where I really don't see, between Scentsies and flameless candles, I really don't see the need for actual candles anymore. I don't really see the need for them.
Another way to keep warm, we've talked space heaters, fireplaces.
Fireplaces. Again, fireplaces are great. They have heated homes for as long as we have had fires and houses. The biggest thing I can say for fireplaces is, regular maintenance. Ensure that you service and have your fireplace cleaned. Make sure that you use appropriate lumber. And those are kind of the biggest things. And again, not leaving it unattended. And along with that, when you're finished with your fire for the night, making sure that you dispose of your ashes in approved containers. So a metal container, a tin container, and outside, preferably, would be your best bet, as to not put them in a plastic container or anything that would be a combustible is your best bet to avoid any sort of house fire.
What's your preference for getting the chimney cleaned or the fireplace cleaned? How often should that be done?
I would say at the start of a season and at the end of a season. Those would be two really good times. And if it's something that you're going to be using regularly, maybe once during that season if you're using it pretty heavily. And there are a lot of chimney cleaning companies within the city, so no excuse to not have that done.
Best to have a professional
Absolutely.
take care of that.
Absolutely.
Furnaces, the most common way to stay warm in the wintertime. Those need maintenance.
Absolutely. Changing out your filters and again, having a professional come out and make sure that that's in tip-top shape. These are things that we often overlook, but regular maintenance goes a long way. Just like we want to make sure that our air conditioners work in the summer, we want to make sure that our heaters work in the wintertime as well. And that preventative maintenance goes a long way to not only making sure that we're comfortable when the seasons change, but also making sure that our appliances don't have to work too hard so that they don't potentially fail on us or cause that fire that we want to avoid.
Yeah. And the filter should be changed every, what's your general rule? I go 3 months.
3 months is a really good estimate. There are mitigating circumstances. For me, I have to change mine more frequently because I have 2 big dogs that shed. So my filters get clogged up a lot more sooner than a person that doesn't have any animals. So I would say, when you start to feel like it's not heating or cooling well enough, take a quick peek at that filter. It costs you nothing to go down and pop that out real quick and take a look. Go from there.
Yeah, here's a tip. We remodeled during the winter months, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and the drywall dust, the sawdust,
Sure.
the simple active reconstruction and remodeling fills up a filter.
Sure.
Quickly. You don't think about that.
You sure don't.
Until you go down and check it. You think, I got 2 more months. You check it, and it should have been changed 2 months prior.
Absolutely.
All right. We mentioned the winter season. It contains the holidays. A lot of people have Christmas trees.
Yes.
And real Christmas trees. Those can dry out. Let's talk about Christmas tree safety.
So with your Christmas trees, you want to make sure that they stay maintained. Keep them watered. Make sure that they don't dry out because, again, with Christmas trees come Christmas lights. Christmas lights are small, but there's a light bulb on there. That light bulb has an element of warmth to it. So warmth with a dry tree can cause a fire, and it does not take a lot for a Christmas tree to catch and really get going. And you have to also remember that most of these trees that we have for like real trees, those oils are really flammable too. So if you have a real tree, keep it watered. If you have a fake tree, you know, make sure you turn it off at the end of the day. Don't let that thing run too terribly long. Think about timers, you know, on your lights, and the same goes for your lights outside. Timers are invaluable to make sure that, you know, all of these things aren't running too long. But watering your real tree, if you decide to have one, is a huge thing. And I'm very glad that we're not in the early 1900s anymore, where people were putting like candles on them. I'm glad that that isn't in fashion anymore.
Have you ever been around a home that uses candles?
Not in
Last
America.
last year I was, and it's a visual. It's a pleasurable thing to see, but it gives you a weird feeling because
Sure.
any minute now you're thinking this could go bad
Right.
real fast.
I get nervous around candles in
You
general, so
would.
seeing one on a tree would make me very
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Where do you come down on extension cords for trees?
So, I mean, that's another thing. I don't see where there would be a need for one, because most people, they're going to put their tree in a corner. There's probably going to be an outlet close by. But again, if we're going to use an extension cord for this tree, my best advice would be when we're done enjoying this tree into the night, unplug it. At that point, no one's awake. No one's going to be watching this tree. No one's going to be enjoying it. It takes a couple seconds to walk over, unplug it. That mitigates the potential for that disaster.
Most people are surprised at how much water a tree takes. So check it
Check it
regularly.
regularly.
If you've got a dog, that dog might even be lapping up some of that water.
I know
You-
mine
You
would.
never know. Yeah. So it takes a lot of water to keep those trees fresh
Yes.
and green and not drying out. So that's just a tip there too. All right, from there are other winter hazards out there. Some people bring their grills indoors because it's too cold outside
Yes,
to grill, and they want to get out of the element a little bit, so they bring it into the garage.
sure. That is a terrible
That's
idea.
a bad idea, isn't
Terrible
it?
idea. You know, one of the things people may think is that, you know, yeah, I'm using a propane grill, there's not open flame, you know, but they often forget about the hazards of carbon monoxide. There's not enough makeup air in your garage to make that a safe environment. So I would say if you still feel the need to use your smoker or use your grill, leave it outside and just wear an extra jacket. You definitely want to make sure that you're being as safe as you can when you're cooking, and the manufacturer's recommendations as well as our recommendations are these were meant to be used outside and they should only be used outside. They are not meant to be used indoors in any capacity, even in your garage with the garage door up. Is still not a recommended or approved fashion to use these things. They are still very dangerous used that way.
I like your term makeup air.
Yes,
There's more air being consumed by the grill than can be replaced in that space.
exactly.
Is that right?
Yep, and that is where the danger comes from. And the desire of people to stay warm would mean that most of them would, I mean, we do get cold in Nebraska, they would probably only crack that garage about halfway. So the likelihood that they would have enough air in there to you know, have that makeup air, it's very unlikely. So leave your grills outside, and you know, with you know, turkeys and things that people might want to deep fry, make sure that that definitely stays outside and as far away from your house as you can get it if you're going to deep fry anything.
My son, who's in the process of remodeling, finishing his basement, we're in a smoke detector subject and a CO subject conversation the other day, and I want to bring that up because that's important for people who are remodeling. It's important for people who are replacing their
Absolutely.
units, remodeling, those sorts of things. Give us optimum locations for smoke detectors.
Sure. Well, if you live in a standard single-family house, it's required that you have CO detection on each level. And while it's not specifically stated where they should be located, I always say put it in a place where it can be easily seen, easily heard, wherever you are. Whether that's in a hallway, whether that's in a main room, whether that's in a great room, that's kind of to your discretion. I mean, if we're using, say, my house, for example, I have mine in the great room in the basement, mounted on the ceiling, because I'm anywhere in the basement I can hear that. And then on the upper level, main room in the upper level, so that anywhere that I am, I can hear it. Now, with that being said, they sell combination smoke and CO detectors. I highly recommend those because everywhere that there's a smoke detector, there's a CO detector, so you've got double the coverage throughout the entirety of your house. And there's kind of the old saying where you have one, you have none, where you have two, you have one, and so on and so forth. So if you have smoke and CO coverage throughout the entirety of your house, you are doubly and triply covered. So I like to see that more than I like to see anything.
They have detectors now that talk to each other.
Yes, they talk to each other.
I
and
think
you
that's
can-
brilliant.
You can even record your own personalized message on some of them.
Really?
They exist, yeah.
And if this is the first time you've heard about smoke detectors or alarms talking to each other, it's really handy if you're in the basement and there's a fire upstairs. The detector in the basement starts to go off
Yep.
and tells you that something on one of the other floors is definitely wrong.
Yep, they're all interconnected, so where one sounds or where one alerts, they all alert so that everyone in the house, no matter where they are, knows that something is going on. And that is a great thing to have in your home.
And they can be retrofit. They're wireless.
Yes.
They can be done wireless. Where do you come down on detectors in kitchens?
Detectors in kitchens, in order to make sure that you don't have nuisance alarms for some of our bad cooks, you want to have them not directly in the kitchen, out and away. If I'm not mistaken, it's 15 feet out and away from the kitchen, in order to make sure that you still have that coverage near the kitchen, but not in the kitchen. Obviously, having one directly over the stove would not be conducive to, a little bit of steam or a little bit of smoke from, baking something in the oven. A lot of our issues with kitchen issues can be mitigated by making sure that if you are cooking, that's the only thing that you're doing while you're there. So you're not cooking and doing laundry or cooking and entertaining friends. That is your job until you are done, is focusing entirely on cooking. And so the late night pizza after you've been out with friends all night, that's kind of needs to be a thing of the past. We are only cooking until we are done cooking and nothing else.
Ask me how I know that a smoke detector is not a good idea.
Tell me.
In a kitchen. Toast.
Toast, yes.
Toast will fire that off every time, even if
Yes.
it's clear across the room. And after a while, you just get disgusted and you pull the battery out, which is the wrong thing to do. But
absolute
that's
wrong thing to
human
do.
behavior when
Yes.
you're annoyed by it.
It really is. And the desire to not be bothered by our detectors sometimes will override our common sense to realize that they are doing a very specific job, and that job is to alert us that there is a problem. So throughout our houses, we have to remember that if our smoke detectors or our carbon monoxide detectors are chirping or are alarming and there's not a problem, if we've replaced the batteries and they're continuing to do that, these detectors have a lifespan. So perhaps if they're continuing to alarm or continuing to chirp, it's time to replace that unit. So definitely something else to think about as we're going into the winter seasons. If you're still having issues with them, it's probably about time to replace the unit.
Yeah. Let's circle back to, let's conclude with where we started, and that is
Sure.
the space heaters.
Absolutely.
They have a huge draw on the power supply
Yes.
in the house, and so it may trip a circuit.
Yes.
People may try to figure out a workaround to
Yes.
that. Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. Kind of as I said with smoke detectors, if they are giving you a sign that something's not working, listen to that sign. Pay attention to that sign. If the space heater is constantly tripping a circuit, it is telling you, I have an issue. Pay attention to that issue. Maybe it's time to take that space heater out of service and diagnose the larger issue. Failure to pay attention to some of these signs can result in a bigger issue later, and that's what we want to avoid. So again, if it's probably one that you've had for 15, 20 years and it's constantly tripping a circuit, you know, you may have 4 or 5 times where it trips that circuit, and that 6th time is the time that it doesn't, and then we have ourselves a fire. So be mindful of that going forward.
And if a 20 amp fuse is good, a 25 is not better.
Exactly. Yes.
I've seen that. You've probably seen that yourself.
Absolutely.
I'm tired of this 20 amp fuse busting, and so I'll bring in a 25,
Right.
and it'll hold it longer.
And that
Not
20
a good
is
idea.
busting for a reason.
Yeah.
So
This is the time of year where you're busy, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Isn't it? Wintertime?
between cooking and staying warm, those are our big issues that we have. So I don't like being busy,
No.
but that is the nature of things, unfortunately.
But a lot of it's up to you, good viewers. A lot of it's up to you. Safety with space heaters, extension cords. We haven't even talked about turkeys, the frying turkeys. And I know Thanksgiving has come and gone, but that's a thing.
It is a thing.
Even after Thanksgiving. Have you ever done that?
I have
I've been in a crowd where it's happened, and it was done safely. And by the way, end result's a pretty good turkey.
I have seen enough videos to make me swear it off forever. I will stick with a oven baked or a smoked turkey.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. It still ends up being a good bird.
Sure.
So, all right, Jason, thank you very
pleasure.
much for coming in and offering your expertise. And do your part, good viewers, do your part by just using some common sense. Make sure you have batteries in your detectors. Don't overload circuits. Certainly do not change the fuses in those circuits just so you can have more things plugged in. Be safe around the fireplace. Check your furnace filters. And watch the show again. Just watch what Jason and I have said, and you can review that and be safe all winter. Thank you. We're here every month on LNK. For LFR, I'm Dale Johnson.